Alright, so for animation, I'm gonna go and load. I'm gonna dismiss everything here. I'm gonna go clean that, and simply, instead of loading an image, I'm gonna load an image sequence from the animation menu. So that's why you have a bunch of import and export options relative to the animation. So first one I'm gonna do is load a sequence. Alright, so loading that sequence, I need to go find the folder that contains all these images. I'm sure I can find it here on the libraries. I think I had it on the documents, down to output Moho. There it is. And here are my files. Now, by default, it looks for a bunch of different image formats. I'm going to use just TGA, and we should have just our image sequence. Remember, I named it frames, and then so it added an underscore and then a number to indicate the sequence. And for this one here, you select, and then you can select and drag, or shift select, right? You click here and then go to shift click somewhere else. Let's say you want only the first 60 frames, you shift click on frame number 60, right? Or you want them all, you go to here. So you have selected all frames that you want, and then you load selected. So you load those selected images into an animation. Now, here's the funny part. The way that the Targa image is stored in coming out of Moho seems to be upside down. Well, at least relative to what we do when we load it back in. But that's okay, that's not the end of the world. We can simply flip it upside down, right side up here, go flip vertical. Right? And in fact, if you wanted him to walk the other way, you could certainly do that too. Now, right now, it's walking this way, and what we could do is flip it horizontally as well. Flip it horizontal. Boom. Alright, so that's a quick fix for the upside down thing. And hey, maybe it's a bat hanging from the ceiling, so you might not even fix the vertical orientation. Just leave it the way you want and move on. So one thing we did a lot when we had those images, we stored them. That's part of the workflow we keep using. One thing I'm going to do here is store the animation. Now, if you work with short animations, they can go to memory, but don't waste it. Don't put too many of them. If you have a hard drive that has a high capacity, you should actually have one that's a fast one, like an SSD drive. Compare how fast that is. If I go to memory, it's pretty much instantaneous, right? The whole animation gets saved into memory. If I store that to the hard drive, it can also be almost instantaneous. Boom. Did you notice that? I had barely time to blink and it's already saved it to SSD. So that's where you want to be with a fast SSD. And now what do we do with that? Well, we will combine that in a way similar to what we had before with the two images. One thing I'll do, I want to, I'm gonna need to identify the mask here. Now that's a little bit tricky because it's moving, right? So from one frame to the other, we can certainly do that, and maybe it's repetitive and we don't really need to do that for the entire animation. Maybe if we limit it to just 30 frames or 20 or so, we may identify how many there really are that we need, right? If we start from here and then here we are again, yep, that frame and that frame almost see identical. I think they are identical, right? Check this one here. Let's go store this one and then go this one here. Check this part here, his left leg. I think that one is pretty much identical. So I'm going to store that one, and now let's take a look at it. Ooh, they're slightly different. Almost the same though. So that could potentially be used as the key for repeat. And so we could say go from here to here, and then simply work on that. Right? So I'm going to go one more frame. That would be to the next frame here, frame number 33, and then mark that as the in. I'm going to delete the remaining frames. I have a stored copy here, so I'm safe to play with that. I'm going to go mark this as the in, put an in marker there, in point, and then put an out marker, and then right click on that timeline and simply delete block. I've marked the block going from the beginning to the end. In fact, before that, let's go check where that block is. There it is. It's marked that, right, all the way to the end. So we can go and right click on the timeline and say delete block, and then that will delete these frames that were in that selected block. Now I have a shorter animation. Let's go store that. And if you want a safe copy to work with later, if the program were to crash or power outage or whatnot, or you're running out of time, one thing you can do, first of all, store to disk, and there's always a way to find that it is stored on disk. But you can also very quickly just create a save copy. Save it, right? So let's say you want that in here, short version .dwa, dog waffle animation. So that's a quick memory dump, right? And then that way you could quite easily reload it. Simply go open and work with that to find this short right here. Okay, so we have just 33 frames from number 1 to number 33, and for each of those we would like to identify the background and make it transparent. Now the trick here is that it's a bit tricky because we don't have an alpha channel that will be following in an animated form. We don't have an animation on the alpha channel. So we're going to need to work with this as a grayscale image and mark the background as the I don't know, somehow mark it as transparent and flag it, and then the rest will not be flagged, something like that. So there's a couple of ways we could do that. One way that I'm going to try is to see if I can load it into the brush and then use the keying there to flag it, because the brush system has an alpha channel, right? That is animated, meaning frame by frame. So first thing I'm going to do is put the whole thing into the brush. Right? So I can do that in a couple of ways. I can go to the custom brush selection tool and simply go from here to here if I want the whole thing. Now I may not really need the whole thing, so it's kind of an overkill. See, I picked up the whole brush and there's so much grayscale around it, or gray background, that I don't really need the whole thing. So I'm going to go instead, keep an eye on where I am here, or perhaps even break it, crop it a little bit. Let's go and select just a block about this much. See if that's enough to make sure he stays inside. Make sure you scrub through it. Take the top, take a look at the top. He's coming close there, but he's not reaching the top. So we could even make it a little bit smaller. We can use the shift key and the right button to select a little bit less of that, right, to remove from that selection. You really absolutely want to make sure, though, he doesn't get close to touch it or cross over at the top here. Same thing with the front on the nose here. Make sure the nose is always a fairly nice little safe distance away from that. So maybe this is the closest we want it to go. Let's go with the selection about here and remove that. And then on the left side, let's take a look at how far the tail can go. Something like this, and go like that. Again, that's the shift key with the right button. Left button will add. If I do shift, it will add. If I do shift with the right button, it will remove. Okay, so and that's because we have black and white, or whatever the reason is, right? So here at the bottom we want the safe zone to be there too, maybe a little bit closer. So the feet are staying at that level where the dragon is walking. The animation in Moho took care of that. So I'm gonna go and shift and right click very close here. So we are almost on the ground there with the feet. It's probably good still to have a little bit of a margin. Alright, so we have this little animation. We probably should save that. Right, so now we can crop to that first. Let's go do that. Image, crop to animation. Right, but of course we still need to select eventually select we still need to eventually select the background to turn it transparent. Still, it's a good idea to store that. Right now, also verify what the dimensions are, because we manually selected the size as we cropped. So go to image menu and make sure there are no odd numbers. Well, there is here. See, buffer width 579. That's not so good. You really want to make it something that's an even number, preferably divided not only by 2, divisible by 4 or by 8, because many of the compression codecs that we will eventually use prefer that. Probably none of them work with odd numbers. So it's gonna, if you save this as an AVI or as an MP4, it may be savable.